One of the last steps of the project is to talk about sanding. So before we talk about sanding or using any kind of abrasive paper, we're gonna give you a little bit of background information on that. So in this class, we don't really use sandpaper per se, we use abrasive paper. If we tried to use a product that had sand on it, like a garnet or something like that from over in the wood shop, it would not last very long because metal is very hard. So they use different types of abrasives over in the metal shop here, and it's very efficient for what we do in here. So this material is called aluminum oxide, and it will take and remove the machine marks and things like that from our project. So we're going to unscrew this thing, separate the two parts, and we will begin to sand it. So with our sandpaper, we're going to work with 4 grits inside of here. So with most of our machine work, we can start with 150 grit sandpaper. Okay, so what is 150 grit? On the back of our paper, it's listed, it says P150. That means there are 150 pieces of abrasive in 1 square inch of this abrasive paper. So with that being said, there's 150 pieces of abrasive. This is going to be used to take off a lot of the machine marks, cut marks, saw marks from the machines. Once we finish up with our 150 grit sandpaper, we're then going to move to 220 grit sandpaper, P220. The 220 grit sandpaper is going to put smaller scratches in our project. After we finish our 220, we're then going to move to 320 grit sandpaper, 320 grit scratches. Okay, the scratches get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Eventually, you can't see the scratches. That would be this one here, this 400 grit sandpaper. We'll probably sand up to 400 with this dry. We can also wet this sandpaper and wet sand it, and we'll talk about that a little bit later down the line. So, what's the most efficient way to sand in here? So, for the hammerhead, I will actually take the hammerhead, I'm going to lay this flat on the sandpaper like this. I'm going to take a little bit of light pressure, and I'm going to move this back and forth. And you can see the sandpaper starting to turn black. There's material starting to be removed from this. That could be dirt, grime, a little bit of mill scale that's left on this from when they originally made the steel. So let's stop part way here so you can see what this side looks like. We've done nothing to it. If I look at the other side, you can start to see that we're getting a little bit of a shine to it, and some of those marks are being removed. So we'll continue to sand here until everything is a consistent look. So once everything is consistent with the 150 grit sandpaper, we can jump up to our 220, 320, 400. But you can't skip the steps. You have to put the time in and sand with the 150 grit first until all those marks are out. What'll happen, students will sand a little bit with 150, they'll jump right to 400 and say, Mr. Murray, I'm done with this, it's sanded, it's good to go. The problem is, you still have the 150 grit scratches in it, and you can definitely tell, okay, so you can't skip over the steps. So continue to sand, we'll show you another little side here again, and you can see it's really starting to shine up. You can actually, has a little bit of a mirror finish to it, and but you can still see there's still some crap on here. There's still some, a little bit of mill scale. Now there are some imperfections in the metal. Some of that stuff we're not going to be able to get out. Okay, that's just kind of the nature of the beast here. So that's our side right now with 150 grit. You can see where I'm at. If I flip to the other side where there's nothing, it's very dull looking and it's still kind of porous looking. So we're going to continue to sand this a little bit more. Once I get this sanded at 100% with 150 grit sandpaper, we'll come back, show you 220. We'll run it the exact same way here, okay? We'll see you folks in just a minute once this is done. Okay, so we're caught up with the 150 grit sandpaper. You can see that we have a pretty much a bright, shiny appearance all the way around on this thing. Most of the mill scale, all the garbage is removed, even at the back side there. Now, we're gonna do the exact same thing with the hammer handle. So as I sand this, I'm just gonna jump and do the hammer handle at the same time. The only thing we are sanding is this portion right here. We're not sanding anything that is knurled. We're also not going to sand anything that's threaded. So we're going to jump and I'm going to sand this also, and we'll continue to show you the steps. So just like we did, we're going to now jump to the 220 grit sandpaper. So this sandpaper, you can see, is starting to get a little nasty looking, but that's where it's taking all the stuff off the metal. So just like we did before, we're going to lay our material flat on here and continue to sand. One thing about metal, compared to wood. Some of you folks have wood tech next door with Mr. Wells. Wood has grain. Okay, the grain looks like the lines in the wood. When you sand wood, you have to sand with the grain. Okay, with metal, there is no grain per se. So when we're sanding it, you can go in a circular pattern, you can go diagonal, you can go straight across, you can go horizontal. Any which way you want to go, you're welcome to sand. So sometimes if you sand across the machine marks that you see, sometimes it's actually a little bit easier. It'll take and remove those a little bit faster, but there is no specified way to sand. Okay, you can go any which way you want. Some people kind of complain a little bit and they say, Mr. Marie, why can't we use a power sander for this? This object is small and it also has sharp edges and corners. If I try to use a DA sander or random orbital sander, quarter sheet palm sander, it's going to take and tear that sandpaper apart and it's going to ruin the bottom of my sanding disc that's on that sander. So that's kind of out of the question for this. So we're just going to sand it by hand. We're going to take our time and continue to work our material across here. So you can tell, let's pull this up in just a second here. You can see the 220 is removing more marks and we're starting to bring more shine out to it. So like I said, it's a process, nothing to get excited about, but take your time as you go to sand this thing. If you do take your time in the sanding, once we do go to buff this thing, you can get it to almost a mirror shine where you can see your face in it. So I don't know if we're gonna get that crazy with it, but you know, it's definitely doable if you put the time and effort into sand it, okay? So I'm gonna continue to sand here. We'll come back when we're done with this here. We'll come back, show you the 320, and we'll see you in a minute. Okay, just to show you where we're at, we took our handle. If you remember before, it was kind of had a bunch of bands and different rings in it from cutting on the lathe. We sanded these with 150 and 220 grit sandpaper. We've also taken our hammerhead and we've sanded that through 220, so you can see the shine's definitely starting to come out of that. We're just going to keep working with it. Notice your hands, you're going to get dirty during this process. It's just a fact of life. It is what it is. Anything worthwhile takes time and takes a little bit of effort. So we're going to continue to sand here, 320 grit sandpaper. We'll do hammerhead, the top of the handle, and we'll see you back here at the 400. Okay, we're into the 400 here, so you can see the shine's really starting to come out of this. You know, our machine marks are definitely out of it. Like I said, we're going to keep doing smaller scratches until it's totally smooth. So this won't take too much longer. Like I said, we'll do our 400 on our head. We'll also do it on that part of the hammer handle. So I got that sanded up to 320 also. We're not going to wet sand. We're not going to wet sand this quite yet. What we'll probably do is we'll sand with the 400. We'll take you over to the buffer, show you what that looks like, and we'll see what we come up with. Sometimes what it's a little bit better to do is go to your 400 sand, buff it a little bit. After you buff, then sometimes you can see if there's any lines or scratches or something like that that did not come out. So sometimes it's worthwhile to bounce around back and forth a little bit between sanding and buffing. So we'll probably run that method of doing it just to see where we're at. So we'll see over here at the buffer in just a little bit. Okay, folks, the next thing I'm going to do here is take and buff the hammerhead. So if you look at the side here, okay, very shine. It has a little bit of depth to it. We want to take and buff that. We also got our hammer handle just about the same. So this is the buffer. This is our buffing compound. So for the steel, we're going to start with this red compound. It's called Red Rouge. And the Red Rouge compound's a heavier cutting compound. We'll do the, we could actually use it on the hammer handle first. So we'll do the hammer handle first. That's usually a little quicker. And then we'll work on that hammerhead. So power's not on. Let's get her plugged in here. There are plugs underneath this buffer buffing table. So if for some reason it doesn't turn on, obviously it's not plugged in. So let's do that real fast. Okay, there we go. And now we're on, so we're going to take a little bit of compound. Remember, stand to the side when you apply the compound to the low side of the wheel. You'll see that wheel change color just a little bit. And now we're going to take our handle. We're going to go very light pressure. And we're going to move this back and forth. And immediately you can see, so there's where we didn't buff. There's where we did buff. Okay? Immediately, it does not take long. Okay, light pressure, we go back and forth with this thing. Okay, so the right side puts the compound on, that's what's doing the cutting. The left side is going to clean the compound up or clean it off. You can also take it, if you don't want to go back and forth, you can also take this and spin it in a circular motion. That's also another way to apply the compound. Now this wheel is getting a little small, it should probably be replaced in, but it'll work for what we're doing here today. So you can see that it really does bring the shine out for our project. Okay, for a clean wheel. You'll probably get a little static electricity, you'll probably get shocked a little bit, but it's not the end of the world. Okay, so you can see what this looks like. Now, sometimes you'll get, I didn't really spend too much time in this, and you can see how fast it came to a nice shine. Every now and again, you get some leftover compound that stays on the material. You can take either a rag, a piece of paper towel, something like that, and you can shine that up in no time. Okay, so that's with the red compound. We'll probably come back and do the green compound second. That green compound is specifically for aluminum, so it'll cut a little bit nicer. We'll put just a little bit more compound on the wheel here, and we'll start the hammerhead. So there's a before, and we'll start the buff. Okay, low side at a time. Remember, we don't go all the way down like this. Okay, we're only going to do half of it, and then we'll rotate and do the other half. So do a little bit at a time here. So right now, it looks kind of cloudy, but you can just see that shine starting to come through here. So let me clean this side off once. So you can see real quick before and after. Now, like I said, I didn't really put any time into this, but you can see it's like a mirror. So if you do sand the hammer correctly, there we go, now it's right side up. If you sand the hammer correctly and take your time with it, you know, this will come out very nice. So let's buff a little bit on the other side. As you're buffing, you don't have to load a ton of compound onto the wheel. You know, these don't require compound every 2 seconds. And you also don't want to take and get too much on there, which causes some problems. So you can see I've been on here for about 4 minutes. I'm looking at the video, and you can see how shiny that is, okay, compared to the other side. Let's flip it. Look how dull. Okay, can't even see it. So I'm going to spend some more time. I'm going to continue to buff this, and then we'll switch to that green compound, and we'll go from there. Okay, so I went through and buffed the entire hammerhead, and like I said, it's mirror-like. Oh, we're upside down. It's mirror-like. Okay, all the way around. This thing has a very nice shine to it. And for steel, that's pretty impressive because steel's obviously pretty hard. So our hammerhead looks pretty great. We'll just stay with the red rouge on the head. We're going to bump and put a little bit of green compound on here now. So that's our green compound. We're going to put just a little bit on there. And we'll go over this handle just one more time. Sometimes that green cuts a little nicer than the red on the aluminum. So once again, light pressure, low side of the wheel. No hoodie strings. No chains, no jewelry, no nothing hanging down. The buffer in the back of the room moves about twice as fast as this, so it can be a little bit dicey. Really no, you can use it if you like, but it's not a requirement. Okay, you see a little bit more depth out of that green compound. Like I said, it's almost like a mirror. You know what the hell, we got the time. We'll put a little green on here. We'll run it over to hammerhead real quick. See if we can get this to shine up just a little bit more. Now, I didn't put a whole lot of time into the buffing end of this thing here. We've been buffing for probably, 10 minutes total. but you could really get this thing to shine up. I have some other different compounds you could play with and try in here. I have a blue it's like an ultra bright compound. That stuff it's pretty sick. So let's you can see, I don't know if you can see that any different or not. It's just a little brighter. We'll run the whole thing just for a quick second here. We'll do a quick pass with the green. And like I said, the sanding's the biggest part of this. If you don't take your time doing the sanding, you're going to kind of cancel yourself out here when it comes to the buffing. So take your time, sand well, and the buffing goes much faster. I'll put a little more compound on. Your material's probably going to get warm because there is a lot of friction here, but we don't want to. We don't want gloves or anything like that, so I'm actually going to cool this down in the sink because it's getting a little hot to the touch. Or if I can finish it quick here. I think we got it. Actually, we got all the sides done. So there is our finished hammerhead, buffed to a high shine. And like I said, if we went, I could spend all day buffing this thing. We could really get crazy with it and have it come to a nice shine. So we'll take a red rag here. We'll clean this off. Any extra compound. We'll do the same exact thing on our handle. Very last step here, people. Before we totally call it done here, let's assemble this thing. Let's screw it together. If I can find the hole here. There she be. I've got a little burr on the outside edge. Sometimes with the last threading there, we get a little bit of a burr. There it goes. Screw this thing together. And we don't have to crank on it. We don't have to go bananas when we got to tighten it. And that is it, folks. That is the finished hammer. Duck on so you can see me here. That is the finished machinist hammer. Okay, so we got the nose of the hammer there. We cut that by hand. We got our back corners. We took those and filed those, obviously, did chamfer. We drilled it and tapped it. We also made our handle from scratch. We took from the beginning, we knurled this thing. We did a turning cut. We reduced our diameter. We did a facing cut on the backside, a chamfer cut on the backside, and obviously we threaded the outside of it and did a chamfer on that. So that's what it looks like, folks. That's what you'll be making in here.